much longer will you follow me? My name is Matthew Kroll.
And the difference between film and memory is that film is always false. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Long Day's Journey into Night.
And I gotta say, I'm proud of us a little bit because we
did a shift, a real quick.
We did a real quick shift because we knew that Long Day's Journey into Night, the new Bygone film, was only playing for this week in New York City.
Yep.
And we could have gone and seen a movie about a man seeking vengeance for his dead canine friend.
There's a little more to that, but yeah.
But we opted not to because we thought, this is actually prompted by Red Charazan's email from
his
voicemail from our gift of movie episode, where he not only emphatically recommended this film, but basically talked about it as life transforming.
That's right. Red Charzan, VFX editor to the stars, currently working at Cicalia Pictures. Yeah. So, by the way, I did see John Wick.
Oh, you did?
We're doing that next week. I don't want to talk about it, but it's been an interesting sort of dichotomy. First watching Long Day's Journey into Night and then John Wick.
Wow, you did them both.
Yeah.
In the same night?
No.
God, that would have been one hell of a night.
Yeah.
I want to, if I can, because I feel like we're going to do a non-spoilery episode about. I mean, there's not a lot to spoil with this movie.
You can discuss this film without spoiling it, and any time where we discuss a spoiler, I will say it would be like a quick thing. It's not something that we will harp on, and therefore, if we're about to say, okay, one thing here, you could probably fast forward 2 minutes.
Well,
and
also,
it would be okay.
I don't think the plot mechanics aren't that important. So if you're listening in and you haven't seen Long Day's Journey into Night, please stick around, even if you haven't been able to see it. I know it's hard to get to. The second thing is, if you can get to a screening of Long Day's Journey into Night, you should, especially if you can get to see it in 3D, which it is in 3D. If I can, I'm just going to recap Red's voicemail. I'll just read it out here. But basically, he describes it as one of the best movies made in the last year, and frankly, one of the most magical pieces of cinema he's seen in a long time. So that is what we're in for today. Before we get to that, I want to read, obviously, our emails.
We have a bunch of stuff.
Emails and tweets, and a negative review, which that's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna be fun. Okay.
You want to go first?
Yeah, okay, sure. So Baby Dread, what up, Baby Dread? Tweeted at us, CJ completely read my mind on how I didn't enjoy this movie. Even down to the referencing / recommending Smashed as an example of the subject matter being tackled much better. I remember back in the day, Colossal, how long ago was that review?
It actually wasn't that long. It was the year before last.
That's a long time. That's in our time period. That's I don't know, 60 movies ago?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
But the funny thing there was that I kind of tweeted back to Baby Dread, mentioning that he might not enjoy our top 10 of the year that year because Colossal appeared on it.
It's true.
On my list. Although I do remember CJ Johnson, friend of the show from Australia, who was on that episode and has been on a couple of other episodes as well. I think he was on our Mother episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated this movie.
Yeah, I know we didn't. But you know
what? I can entirely see that point of view. I loved it. Smashed, I think, is an interesting example because Smashed is basically a film about alcoholism without kaiju. Which just makes
as we've shown, kaiju make everything better.
So an entirely different proposition.
I mean, look, hopefully kaiju's going to make the actual Godzilla franchise at this point better.
Isn't Godzilla? Godzilla is kaiju.
Yes,
right?
but the last film, it did technically,
and
but
it had a Mothra in it, didn't it?
No, it didn't. It just had nameless monsters.
Wasn't it a Mothra?
No, Mothra's in this one. I'm psyched for Mothra.
What's the big flying mosquito type thing?
It's a moth,
right,
but that's Mothra, which is in this current one.
But wasn't that in the one?
No,
with,
they were nameless insectoid kaiju.
Did they even call?
No, because they weren't. They called Godzilla, but they didn't call those monsters anything because they just made them up for the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing canon is important to you on this one.
I mean, I like look. If you're not signing on to Godzilla for the actual named monsters, then what the hell are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to think. In the case of in the Superman film, for example, they don't say Superman in the very first one.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just saying. Does it matter if they don't name it? It's still there.
No, I don't know. I'm saying if you're gonna make a Godzilla movie, make a Godzilla movie. Don't be like, and now these nameless monsters. I would rather the 2000 Matthew Broderick film,
the Roland Emmerich one, which gave us that great Puff Daddy song.
Yeah, over the last Godzilla movie. Even though the last 15 minutes of that Godzilla movie were pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, we we jumped straight from Colossal to Godzilla. I love also that Baby Dread has basically been doing a deep dive in our back catalog. And he's tweeting at me or at us a lot with whenever he hears a thing, and I love that, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Baby Dread.
So following on, there's another one from Baby Dread. Mandy, I honestly believe you could skip the first hour of the movie and have a more engaging time. Action would be picking up, and it would challenge a viewer to piece together the story. Thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, although the cult scene when he's like dancing around and stuff, and it's all trippy, like that was the first time in the movie where I was like, oh, something interesting's happening. If we're talking about from there on, maybe. I mean,
you know what? I at the beginning I kind of disagreed with Baby Dread, but I see his point, which is that I think that for me, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I saw Mandy. My feeling was the second half was less interesting than the first half. And
because it turns into a Dark Souls game.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, without all the cool lore, it's just Nicolas Cage
And
fighting monsters, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And I think maybe the way Baby Dread is talking about it might make that second half more interesting because it's intercutting it with the first half. I don't know. It's a nice hypothetical exercise. I kind of on the fence on this one. I believe maybe it points to the thing that I kind of felt strongly about that film, which is that it once it became Vengeance Dark Souls, I was less interested in it. Though it is gorgeous. That movie is beautiful.
It's a real pretty piece of film.
Yep.
Moving on, Jonathan the Blade says, the conversation that we had about anthology-style films reminded him that it is time to revisit Hollywood Shuffle.
Which is a fantastic anthology film by Robert Townsend, a film that I hadn't actually even thought about for a long time. I love the fact as well, Hollywood Shuffle is basically that kind of anthology film about black actors in Hollywood trying to be, trying to get great roles, and there's so many great sketches in it. And I love the fact that Robert Townsend also kind of like followed up and actually committed to the idea by making one of the first black superhero films, Meteor Man.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a fun trip down memory lane. Jake L. Broke Hobo Spider-Man, aka the Blade, also says Meteor Man is also a winner by virtue of having Big Daddy Kane in it.
Yes,
makes me want to dive into all two of the movies in his filmography. That also, the whole thing, Robert Townsend, Big Daddy Kane, anthology films, Hollywood, it all culminates in one of my favorite Public Enemy songs, Burn Hollywood Burn, which I think we played. We played it on this. So I loved, thank you for reminding us of that film, The Blade. That was also in reference to our Gift of Movies episode, in which you gave me an anthology film, UHF, by one Weird Al Yankovic.
Let me be your hog.
Yeah. Spatula.
Hey, if you buy 10 spatulas, you'll get the 11th for just a penny.
Yeah, there you go.
Moving on. So we got a bit of, how we always on iTunes, and please rate us on iTunes, 5 stars being the best, because we'll take all the stars you can give. We got a person whom only could give us 3 stars.
Ooh.
And we're going to read out, it's a little bit, it's coming at us a little bit.
Okay, well, let's read it.
Here we go. So this is from Heyna 19. That, for whatever it is, in my brain, I just went, hey, now,
Part of me wonders if this might be a New Zealander, because Heyna is kind of a New Zealand colloquialism.
Oh, well, I mean...
Or actually, it's Yena. Maybe. I don't know.
Here we go. So they say this. Just listened to the Burning episode and thought the discussion of it was very well done by the 2 hosts. Except... Oh, yeah, thanks. Except the part on the portrayal of the main female character. I agreed more with Matt and thought Shahir was trying to explain it away. My main problem was more with Shahir using Me Too and Black Lives Matter as references, as we wanted to see better representation on film, when neither of these movements have anything to do with their representation on film/media. Oscar So White would have made more sense, but it still wouldn't support his reasoning of trying to downplay its importance. Me Too is about sexual assault and abuse, which did get co-opted by Hollywood, but because of what was happening behind the screen and not in front. And then Black Lives Matter is about police brutality against black people. Please don't conflate these things, because it just comes off as you aren't actually invested in either of these movements or better representation in media, and maybe you aren't.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this before I kind of talk about what we were talking about?
I don't think. I remember I remember this moment in the review when you brought this stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking in my head that it, to be honest, wasn't the clearest analogy for what I knew you were trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But never in a million years. And again, I mean, this could also come from someone whom has only listened to our burning episode.
Yeah, yeah.
And probably and might not know, having the breadth of God, 200 and something episodes of like where we stand on a lot of things. So I can see the possibility of being misconstrued, and obviously it's good for people to speak out when they disagree with us on a thing. I think the disagreement here is a little bit, I don't know what the word is. I misplaced or misinformed with sort of what I feel your opinions on these things are. Although I can see how one episode and one statement and us moving past it very quickly could come off as disingenuous.
Right. So first off, if in any way whatever I said, what I said kind of comes across as not being invested in Black Lives Matter or Me Too as individual movements, I apologize for that. But that's not the case. And I think that many episodes will kind of bear that. Listening to more episodes will kind of bear that out. Also, that's not. I also kind of disagree. I'm going to borrow a line from Quentin Tarantino here, which is I disagree with the hypothesis here, which is that the point that I was making there is that we live in a culture which is, in cinema in particular, reflects upon popular social movements. There's a lot of writing about how social movements get reflected in cinema, and I think it's impossible to undersell the idea that Me Too and Black Lives Matter, for example, are reflected in popular culture like movies. There's a great talk at the Brookings Institute about Black Lives Matter and the representation and how Black Lives Matter is an extension of the need for representation in cinema. There's a fantastic Tribeca Film has had a recent a playlist of Black Lives Matter on film as a discussion on how Black Lives Matter is a reflection of popular sentiment in film, and Me Too. And I found a couple of interesting articles about this. My point here is that I don't withdraw my statement, which I think at the time was basically talking about. I think we were talking about
we were talking about the tropiness
of the female character not really having as much agency as we think. And I think my point there was that we do live in a world now where these popular social movements are kind of impacting the way we view films. Mm-hmm. And my point there is I don't necessarily think entirely that that it has to be that way, because I don't think films have to reflect the needs of a social movement. They can, and if you're an ethical filmmaker, they possibly should, but I don't think films, like, for example, an example of this would be the way in which Quentin Tarantino uses the N-words in films, is entirely representative of the way we kind of view that topic now.
And I think my point behind even what we were talking about in Burning is I agree. I don't think films have to do anything.
Yeah.
What I was saying, sort of what bothered me about the sort of female representation, and it does come from the entirety of how society, at least current American coastal society, is moving.
Yeah.
I felt like this felt like the treatment of that character felt old and dismissive and just sort of like I'm over that. Like I'm just saying this from a personal statement. Like I was just like, and obviously these cultural movements, all of a ton of them have influenced how film is being made. And I personally think from a moral standpoint or soapbox that yes, it should. And if you are an ethical person and you want to make something that you feel like will positively affect society, all of these things should be thought about and represented when appropriate. I think Burning in particular didn't care about sort of connecting any of these things, which is the filmmaker's prerogative. It just didn't. I found it less effective for me because of that.
And I don't disagree with what you said. I think you just kind of reiterated the point that I made on that episode, which is that films can reflect social movements. And I think Haynar's point was that Me Too and Black Lives Matter aren't about representation in Hollywood, so therefore using it there, it conflates the terms. And I disagree with that hypothesis. There's a couple of books I want to point to. There's a book a collection of essays which I read last year called We Gonna Be All Right by Jeff Chang, which is a collection of essays about the intersection between social movements and culture, particularly Black Lives Matter. If you read that essay, which I read around the time we went and saw a documentary called For Akeem by a friend of mine, Landon Van Source and Jeremy Levine, which basically is a documentary about the reflection of Black Lives Matter in an individual life and looking at that movement. And I think it's a really powerful movement as well.
Here's what I think might be getting a little bit crossed across all of this stuff too. Neither of the movements which Hannah brought up, Me Too or Black Lives Matter, are intrinsically about films or representation sort of in films. Those are exactly sort of what they've brought up, but that doesn't mean that it's not all connected.
Yeah,
they definitely did not. Any social movement isn't going to be about or connected instantly with film until film sees the movements and is like, oh yes, correct, and moves in that direction.
Well, and I think this is kind of a broader topic that we've always talked about on the podcast, which is that film is a reflection of society. And then finally, I found a really interesting article called The Moral Responsibility of Cinema, The Politics of Representation and Expectation by Tatwai Lee, which is in thepolitic.org. And I just want to read this paragraph on it because I think it kind of talks about the way we're kind of approaching this topic. Again, if this doesn't kind of answer my explanation, then I apologize for that, but I don't. The only thing I want to say there is I don't think my explanation was flippant. But in Tatwai Lee's article says, when John Chu's Crazy Rich Asians was released, it brought about with the full bited force of 25 years of absent Asian American representation in media. Since then, the movie has become emblematic of a resurgence in racial consciousness in cinema. It rides the massive waves of publicity in Hollywood's injustices and the increasing awareness of the industry's social justice obligations that has emerged in recent years, including through movies Get Out, Black Panther, and the scandals and solidarity of the Me Too movement. Representation is a dialectic, a shared project. It is both a process and goal, a two-way exchange between creatives and their audience. To be responsible consumers of media is not to be passive in consuming it. It is to be charitable when we can and harsh when we have to be. So that is, I think, a reflect. Like when you were talking about how Burning didn't quite, measure up to what you felt was important as a reflection of cinema today. I think that is a representation of where we are as a culture today and what we're looking for in cinema. So that's the way I was using the term. If it didn't work for you, I apologize.
Fair. And actually, this just sort of brings up when
I was going to say this. I really appreciated this, but it would have been. I think it would have been better as an email because then we could have had a conversation about it.
Well, we did have a conversation about it. Look,
directly.
Yes, and actually, honestly, onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. I don't know if Hannah is going to be listening again, but if so, please continue the conversation with us across email because I would be interested to see if the discussion we just had helps at all in this regard, or anybody else out there who thinks we're saying the right things or the wrong things, by any means, come and chat with us.
And I fully really appreciate that they took the time to write this and to call me out on something which we could explain. And I'm very, very happy to have that discussion. And so moving on to one final email from Mihai from Romania, who has written to us before. It's really nice to hear back from you, Mihai. I just discovered that this podcast is also great for doing physical exercise and for running. So
Wait, what?
I enjoy the idea
That's
that we're
great.
in your ears while you're sweating away. But today, my questions are about a movie that just got released on Netflix, and I'm talking about The Wandering Earth.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
curious if any of you have watched and what do you think about it? I have not.
I have not yet, but I do. It's on the short list.
Yes, unfortunately, there's an interesting thing, which is that The Wandering Earth, which is I think the third largest movie in release this year, the second largest in Chinese cinema, with an overall box office haul of around $700 million, got quietly released on Netflix without much fanfare or notification. It wasn't even in their list of upcoming films.
Netflix is weird. And okay, this is a bigger sort of thing, and I don't want to go too off the rails.
Yeah.
But if Netflix is going to survive this Disney Plus shit, they got to start coming at us in different ways. And one thing, to be perfectly honest, that they should do is invest, I think, more at not even advertising dollars, sure, but like whatever they start showing us, things that are off the beaten path that are awesome for off our beaten path.
I was gonna say the $700 million is not off anyone's beaten path.
No, but like, so I mean, you could take a $700 million film that they're kind of burying, or you could take Burning, which that was critically acclaimed, and they're burying. Like, I was just like, remember, I had to search and I had to type the whole word before it even remotely came up. So like, I don't know, man. They got to work on their.
Well, I think there's to be fair, I haven't heard great reviews of the film The Wandering Earth, so I'm curious about that. Although Mihai kind of writes in and says, I actually found the film very entertaining and quite hope-inducing. I don't have a long history with Chinese movies, but I got to say I was pleasantly surprised. The movie feels like a big mashup between genres, and somehow it holds up. I was quite impressed by the cinematography, the special effects, and the CGI, especially for the budget and for something I found interesting. But maybe I'm wrong, and this is, I think, Mihai's greater point, which I think we should talk about as well. Maybe I'm wrong on this one, but every person that's foreign to the Chinese people speaks in their own language, while in most American movies, any person that's foreign to American audiences speak in English with an accent. So maybe I'm wrong in this one, but they usually don't bother subtitling many languages in American movies. I think that's an interesting conversation point. My former professor, Aaron Mannion Park, who's been on the show, has written an interesting article about the nature of subtitling and the sort of objective bias that subtitling has. That might be paraphrasing his article a little bit in the wrong direction, but it's kind of in that ballpark. I think that's fascinating. You know, the film that actually comes up in mind that I remember that with regards to this discussion that Mihai may want to watch is Steven Soderbergh's film Contagion. Because and I remember like noting this very, very hard when it happened, because Contagion is this sort of international movie about the spread of a disease.
Yes.
Right? Like this global epidemic. But every time they cut to a character that was non-American, non-English speaking, the film would just kind of go silent and become a montage. And I was like very curious about how that played out in the film, because it was very, for a film that was ostensibly about this global pandemic, it was very Euro-focused. And it was, I mean, not to the detriment of the film. I still think it's a very fine film, but it was just sort of something I noted about it. And I think Mihai's point might be accurate as well. I haven't seen The Wandering Earth, so I can't quite comment on that in regards to The Wandering Earth, but I do want to see it, and it was on our docket for a little while.
Indeed. Yeah, all right.
But as for another Chinese film that made it kind of a splash at the box office in a really interesting way, we are going to be talking about Bygons' Long Day's Journey into Night. And can I explain? Do you know the story about the box office for?
No.
Oh, okay.
Tell away.
So, Long Day's Journey into Night won, I believe, a couple of Golden Bears at the Berlin Film Festival. It was nominated for awards at the Cannes Film Festival. It was very critically acclaimed when it was released. Bygons' previous film, Kali Blues, I'm pronouncing Kali wrong, was again critically acclaimed. He's a young prodigical film, filmmaker. But the film was aggressively marketed in China as the perfect date movie to bring in the new year.
Wait, this one was?
This one was Long Day's Journey into Night. Very aggressively marketed that way. And in fact, it was an incredibly successful marketing campaign, because the film then had one of the biggest pre-release ticket sales in China, including beating out Avengers.
Did they literally shining this?
There was a trailer and there was a marketing campaign that basically suggested that this is and obviously there's a lot of cultural pride when you hear of a film that does so well internationally, that's been critically acclaimed, and then it was sold as, like, the way it was sold to the Chinese audiences was that it was this amazing, wonderful date romantic movie.
I can see it, like, if it was just called
in 3D,
The Long Day. Like, that is like what?
It had this incredible pre-release ticket sales. I think it racked up something like $35 million, which is bananas for an art house independent film.
And then what happened?
And then that momentum quickly died away as filmgoers were left confused and angered by the lack of narrative clarity and obtuse storytelling. I think the hashtag in China was what nobody could understand what Long Day's Journey into Night was about.
Yeah.
And so it had this incredible backlash after that. It made it, again, for an independent art house movie, it made a significant amount of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, it did all those pre-ticket sales. Has there been yet, which is the goings on of the internet continuously? Has there yet been a backlash to the backlash? That seems to be a running trend these days, especially in gaming circles, when a group is angry about a thing, and then eventually, about a month later, then people get angry at the people that were angry at the thing.
Yeah, I guess the dust hasn't settled on that yet.
We'll see.
We'll see how well. Hopefully, we can contribute to that conversation, because in many cases our title might be erroneous, but this might be one of those cases where we, as far as I can tell, are one of the few podcasts that are talking about this.
We're the only. It's in the title. I don't know what your weird apologist multiverse nonsense you're speaking.
So tell us what Long Day's Journey into Night is about.
A man went back to Guizhou, found the tracks of a mysterious woman. He recalls the summer he spent with her 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, whatever IMDb is at this point.
That is technically what happens in the movie, I think.
Could I read you Justin Chang's synopsis from his review for the Los Angeles Times? And he loves this film. An ex-casino manager named Liu Hongwei, played by Huang Zhu, has returned home after his father's death to Kaili City in China's subtropical Guizhou? Guizhou province. Guizhou province. The city also provided the setting of Bai's beguiling 2015 debut feature, Kylie Blues. As Lou returns to his old stomping grounds, a restaurant run by his stepmother, a tunnel glips through a melancholy sheet of rain, a flooded old building with gorgeous undulating light patterns on the wall, his every forward step draws him backwards, inexorably into the past.
Yeah, again... to be honest, what I'm shown in the film and not what I have to sort of interpret myself, I feel the IMDb one is just as accurate.
Well,
that's more flowery and
I don't even think it's more flowery. I think it's more accurate. I think it's a nicer read.
Oh yeah, well. 100%. Like, I enjoyed hearing that more.
Okay, so Matt, your first impressions of Long Day's Journey into Night. This is going to be a long conversation, I believe.
Oh God, is it?
Yeah.
Just
from the title alone.
I think first things first. Big shout out to the John Carpenter. Feeling very referential in the theme of this film. The instantly, when the theme of this movie, which happens many, many times, which is a beautiful theme, I was like, this is so reminiscent of Escape from New York.
Whoa, that is not a reference I would have ever considered.
But like, I heard it and I was like, where have I heard this before? And then if you listen, I actually listened to them both before the podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not saying one was. I think this is a happy accident, but I was just like, oh, cool. So that was my first thing. It instantly got me in a good mood. So overall, this film was overall difficult for me to get on board with entirely.
Okay.
There are aspects of it which I will discuss, which I think are absolutely brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they excuse some of my personal issues that I took with how the story was told to me. Mm-hmm. I think some stuff that I would like to talk about in the beginning was, first and foremost, how absolutely gorgeous every frame of this movie is. Mm-hmm. Everything from watching a glass rumble off a table by a train going by for a really long time, to watching him wade through that beautiful flooded basement for a long period of time, to him following a woman in his car down a dark tunnel for a long period of time. There's a lot of long shots in this film, and I'm not even talking about the fantastical one that makes up sort of the last third of the film.
Yeah.
It's literally gorgeous. There's so much. Very rarely will I find in a film where I'm like, oh yeah, this feels like a painting. Like light is used as pigment. If I want to get real hoity-toity about how the look of this movie made me feel.
Right.
I was definitely engrossed in how visually stunning it was. Also, sort of marrying that, the sound design itself was really wonderful. I saw it at the Lincoln Center theaters, which I think is one of the only 2 places in New York you can see it.
Yeah.
And it's their sound system was good, and it's not like a crazy one, but it's very like technically sound, and it felt very balanced. And I was like, oh, like I felt all of the places that we went in the film, I felt like I was actually there, which is also a rarity. I do feel like the acting itself also sort of top notch, but here is where I sort of devolve, and this might be my own personal opinions in storytelling and films that I've gotten to at this point in my 37 years on the planet. I think I'm over noir.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean like so the sort of the tenant of the tenant of discovery in the against the backdrop of the city?
Yeah, and like so, a lot of the stuff that I didn't like in this movie, not all of it, harkened back to some problems I have with movies like Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is slow and lilting and sort of like this, not only that, but like the internal struggles of one man's mind, which is basically about his obsession with a woman, which in itself is not, I just don't care.
Yeah, that's
like,
that's the classic tenet of film
I know.
noir, yeah.
And I think I just don't care anymore, and it's hard for me to get latched on, even with all of the beauty sort of going on around this. And then you add to the fact that the way this movie is done, even before we get, again, which I do want to spend a long time talking about the last third of the film, but even before we get to that, it is kind of a stream of consciousness, like scene editing style. It made it very difficult for me to follow.
Yeah.
I loved the LA Times.
Yeah.
But the thing you just read, because like it actually put together some pieces that the movie I felt like did not. Maybe I wasn't quick enough on the uptake to catch the things, but it didn't get that across. I was like, oh yeah, that sort of makes sense until it sort of doesn't. There's like the clues that lead Leo around the city didn't always add up, in my opinion, and maybe you can clarify some stuff for me, because again, I basically got lost, and I think that lost stems from I didn't care about the crux of the style of the story that was being told. Also, as far as the 3D is concerned, this is a minor spoiler, but you're not supposed to wear the 3D glasses the entire time. In fact, there's a part near the end of midpoint or sort of 2/3 through where the character has to go kill some time, and he goes to a 3D movie. Yeah. And that's when you put on the glasses. The shots, and we'll get to that whole sequence itself, is spectacular. 3D added 0 to it.
That's interesting, because I when I went to see it, the 3D projector wasn't working, so I didn't get to see it in 3D. And I was curious. I was curious what 3D would do to her, but I'm interested to hear what you.
Well, because so interestingly enough, and maybe I want to give this film the benefit of the doubt, because I know that this shot is incredibly difficult to pull off. The 3D itself felt just like any other 3D film I'd ever seen. There was nothing sort of special about it. I will say that every once in a while, and maybe only like 5 times throughout this 50-something minute sequence, the 3D seemed to go out a little bit out of sync. And especially on subtitles, you'd kind of see the it's not interlacing, it's whatever the
interocular
thank
split.
You. Yeah, interocular split. And at first I was like, oh, is this doing this on purpose? I was like, is this part of the narrative, like something's falling apart? It wasn't. But then the entire time, it didn't make me feel more engrossed in it. It didn't make me feel any different. It felt like, how do I put it? It felt like someone doing a trick that the first time you see the trick is incredibly powerful. But I've seen the trick 100 times, and I know how the trick works.
What's the trick?
3D.
Okay. Just 3D in general.
Yeah, because like the transition between 2D and 3D, especially in a pseudo narrative perspective. I mean, I've talked a lot about Tron Legacy, how I feel like that really worked. There was honestly. The goal was, because it's going to show you the sort of dreamlike-esque sort of recap of the entire story, that the 3D is going to make it feel different and or more immersive, or I'll even lose more immersive. Just it's supposed to feel different from the rest of the film. And just like what 3D does consistently is after the first 2 or 3 minutes, you forget that it's 3D. And it literally didn't add anything to it other than main character put on 3D glasses. Guess I'll put on 3D glasses, and we went with it. That is not to say, and I'll sort of save it because I've been yammering on for a bit. The sequence itself, despite 3D not being effective for me, holy shit, so good.
So I think you haven't quite explained what the sequence is. So at the last third of the movie, after he puts on the 3D glasses, is a 59-minute single take through a little province in Kylie, where our main character Lou kind of intersects with both time, memory, and even we're not entirely sure in which sort of sphere of consciousness he's entirely in, but it's a single take through that spectrum,
and like a single take that probably covers a quarter mile of stuff. It was a moving experience for me. That was it honestly turned my frown upside down for the entire, like, for as much as I didn't care about the characters and their journey up to that point, what really got me to overall, I feel like I think this film is very worthwhile, was taking all of the hints and the sort of, like, I would say, purposely obtuse storytelling from the first 2/3 of the film, and then doing an amazing, basically the closest thing I've ever seen to what I've experienced dreams to be, and basically do what dreams do, and take your day or whatever you're thinking about or whatever sort of infested your mind over the past couple days, and mashes it all together in a thing that is incredibly fluid and has touch points on what are the sort of both the important aspects of it and minimal, like stupid details that don't mean a thing, or maybe they do. Like it got me so invested. It got me thinking about the first 2/3 way more than they ever did.
Right.
And by the end of it, I was like, this is like never before have I been turned around so intensely on my opinion of a film. Like, right. I feel like the first 2/3 for me personally, and I don't want to take anything away from anybody who enjoys it, but was like doing a ton of homework, and then that last one-shot thing was like that catharsis you get after you learn something and you've put in the effort, and then you get to like experience, you get to use something that you've learned or gathered in a incredibly constructive and emotionally resonant way. It was moving and it was amazing, and I thoroughly thought that it was the absolute, not only saving grace, but like the keystone to the bridge that this movie is, and I absolutely loved it.
Okay, so for me, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations around what this film is and the style of film this is. I shared an article with you, and I think I'll share it on our Twitter handle as well, about a sort of a video essay about slow cinema and this sort of slow cinema movement. But I think, obviously what we're talking about is not in the spectrum of sort of mainstream Hollywood fare, which is probably why that backlash in China kind of happened. This is, sort of more in line with what Bordwell and Thompson talked about in their book on the art film.
Okay.
And the art film kind of has this sort of more stream of consciousness approach, sort of more of a. In fact, I can pull it up here. It is the art film, as according to Thompson and Bordwell, is intended to be a serious artistic work, often experimental and not designed for mass appeal, made primarily for aesthetic reasons rather than for commercial profit, and contains unconventional or highly symbolic content. And I think that definition kind of holds absolutely true in this case. I think the reason that definition also holds true in this case is the way in which the film basically works as, as you were discussing, a reflection on dream theory, like on how do we view dreams and what do dreams mean for us? And in cinema, there is a long sort of history of like dream interpretation and how dreams kind of operate to the, from the most didactic, which would be something like Inception, to the more sort of surreal and fluid, which is kind of closer to how we experience dreams, to, like someone like David Lynch. And to me, this is sort of more on the spectrum of the sort of David Lynch-esque interpretation of dreams, which is that the film is filled with symbols and symbolism that may mean something or may not mean something, and that gain new meaning by the way you interpret it.
David Lynch is an interesting example because I've never felt like, I get that like David Lynch's sort of dreamscapey type stuff to me is has the exact same weight, though different style, than the Inception dream type stuff, because both of those are things where I look at them and I'm like, oh, I understand that this is supposed to be representational of dreams. This film and this section is how I experience dreams.
Yeah.
So I understand there's sort of the interpretation. I don't think one is actually more accurate than the other for me, because this is the most accurate I've experienced.
And I think that would come down to different theories of dreaming.
Right. Or different, or people probably dream differently as well.
Probably. But, for example, one of the most famous works on dreaming that has kind of been debunked most of the time is Sigmund Freud's interpretation of dreams. Which is a fascinating book, and I think has informed so much of how filmmakers interpret dreams, or how filmmakers represent dreams. Particularly people, Alfred Hitchcock was kind of, like used that text as sort of the main representation. And the idea that Freud had was that dreams are an expression of our repression. So dreams are a place where we can fully explore any repressed desires that we might have.
That's on brand.
And that's Freud's kind of theory. And it's often it's not quite being debunked. It's still kind of held as a touchstone in thinking about dreaming, but it's not quite the way we think about dreaming now. And I think one of the sort of more interesting theories that I was reading about last night is the activation synthesis model of dreaming, which was proposed by Alan Hobson and Robert McCleary in 1977. And their idea there was that basically dreaming is a sort of biochemical release mechanism at the end of day, which fires off synaptic connections in our brains in sort of almost random order. But what's interesting there is that we then our brain goes to efforts as part of like our narrative coherency to make connections and to like find meaning within those symbols. Essentially what Freud was saying is that the symbols are what matters.
Right.
And what Hobson and McCleary are saying is that how we interpret the symbols is what matters. The symbols themselves don't matter.
Legos got dumped on the floor, and it's not important what each Lego piece is or represents. What's important is that there's Legos all over the floor, and if you leave them there, you're going to step on them, so you better build something and put it on your shelf.
That is, again, a very roundabout way of, I think, of what I'm trying to say.
At least it's not a food analogy, Shahir. I tried something different.
Basically, like the way I would think about it is Freud would say if you saw an apple in the dream, the apple is important because it represents sex and, the Snow White mythology and yada, yada, yada. And what Hobson and McCleary would say is the apple doesn't matter how, you will reinterpret the apple how it matters to you.
Sure.
And I think
you build whatever you want out of the Legos.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think for me, what was fascinating about watching this film, because I'm curious about the 3D side of it, and I'm curious what the 3D side of it would have done, is that the single I actually think the structural integrity of this film is kind of sound and kind of mind blowing, because the first half of the film is essentially introducing the symbols in a context that so that we can understand what they might mean when they pop up later on in the film. So we. For example, we get little moments like Lau is thinking about his friend Wildcat, who has this sort of bird tattoo on his chest, and then he talks. Lau sort of talks. Lau and the woman that he is like looking for, played by Tae Wing. Have I said that incorrectly? I hope I haven't. I do this all the time. If you're listening in, no, it was Wei Ting, yeah, who I last saw in Lust Caution, and she's wonderful in that. But basically, she talks about how she had an abortion, and Lau is kind of upset by this idea, and he said, "I would have taught, I would have taught my son how to play ping pong." And then when we get into the dream sequence, the very first thing that happens is he meets a young boy whom he plays ping pong with, who has this like ping pong paddle with a bird on it, which lets him take flight later. And you can see by the way I'm sort of already talking about it is. We get these symbols laid up front, and then we get to experience them firsthand.
Yeah.
And what was really fascinating for me is that the long take, I realized suddenly what the power of editing is for me by watching this film, which is that when you have sort of a sort of traditionally edited film, that kind of hard cut between sequences in my brain allows me to compartmentalize moments, and it allows me to kind of see moments as unique and succinct, and I can draw back from them very carefully because I know what the beginning and end of that moment is.
Yeah, the movie put the Legos together for you.
Yeah. And then but in this film, which is this long 59-minute sequence, the moments all kind of started melding together where I was like starting to go, oh, and I was starting to like draw back from moments that had happened earlier and reconnecting them in sort of new and unique ways. And I think that was the power of that long take. It didn't feel like a gimmick. It actually kind of strengthened the way in which I started interpreting symbols. And the longer you kind of like went with it, and the longer you kind of allowed yourself to absorb within the sort of parameters, well, the lack of parameters and where the camera could go and how we would drift in and out of sequences, the more I kind of, I guess fell under the spell of this movie of being in that sort of hypnotic dream state. I still think the sort of the mechanics of long takes, which is what I always kind of come back to as a filmmaker, are still ever present in this film.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Most of the takes are long, even when it is cutting like a traditional film. But
what I mean there is like watching the sort of the live theater of a long take, which is like seeing when the example I'll bring up is when they get down to a pool table, and like Lau is holding down one of these punks who's basically attacked the woman who he thinks is Wan Qui-Win's character, and he holds this guy down the table and he says, "I'll tell you what, I'll let you go if you can hit this shot." And I just I was like feeling the tension of this actor who has to like nail this shot, because if they don't, they've just thrown out a 30-minute take of everything leading up to it. And I love that sort of live theater of like long takes.
I wonder if the pool. I was thinking this because it's hard not to think of the technical aspect when you're dealing with stuff, especially when it's sort of esoteric in narrative nature or content. Like, was that pool shot digital?
I don't believe it was. I think it could be. It didn't.
It didn't look it.
It didn't look it to me, and I think it would ruin the.
It would 100%
ruin the integrity of what they were trying to capture in there, which is not this sort of the perfection of a single take that you might see in someone else who's kind of showing off a long take. And the example I'll bring is me. I've done like a long take music video where it was a 4.5 minute long take music video, and the point there was we were trying to show off our ability to coordinate this sequence. I don't think I can think of an example where there's a certain showing off, but I think there's this sort of what it actually does in this sequence is enhance the sort of dreaminess of and the sort of the fluidity between memory, present, past, and interpretation.
The reason why I'm not using the G word, which I do throw around quite vigorously, which is gimmick.
Yeah.
This is not a gimmick. This is and it's not showing off. It's it's literally a narrative construct that feeds what the entire film is actually trying to say, or at least the emotions that the film is trying to get across to you. And it's the sheer act of it being a 59-minute shot.
We can round up to an hour.
I like saying 59 minutes over and over and over because it's interesting. It didn't go for an hour. Like, they could have made that an hour, but they didn't want to. They made it 59 minutes. It is narratively important in your experience of what's happening in the story that it is shown to you in that way.
Yeah.
And that is why it is the farthest thing from a gimmick. And though it is incredibly technically, insanely, like, you have to be a master in this craft to possibly do it, it never comes off as showing off.
Yeah.
And those things are nuts to me. Like, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and so to me, that what I love there is the sort of employing of like an incredibly technical craft for something as wildly interpretive as dreams and memory. And the reason I think I wanted to see it in 3D because I wanted to see how basically essentially an auteur kind of approach to 3D. And there's been a couple of examples. Gaspar Noé did his film Love in 3D, which I haven't been able to see. It's on Netflix, but watch at your own caution. It's very explicit.
Can you watch that 3D on Netflix?
You used to be able to. They've removed it now.
Oh.
And I would, the thing is, I found the duration, the sort of fluidity of that single take to be so immersive, and I was like, I really wonder. I feel like watching it, I go, I'm not a big fan of 3D, but I wonder how that would have increased it, because the thing is that in the real world, it all, in the sort of two-dimensional world, it all felt very real and grounded, and then I wondered about 3D kind of being able to like cast the shackles off it entirely so it felt more fluid. And what I was excited about for that, again, not having seen it, is the idea that we were employing this sort of technology that's only primarily been used as a gimmick, predominantly in most experiences of it, to make it feel kind of unique and interesting, and doing something interpretive with 3D that I don't think we had quite seen before.
I think for that level of not excitement, I'll say interest that you feel, I feel like the technology and what 3D does has yet to, even with this film, as this would be if ever there was a film where what you just described could possibly happen, I'd be like, yeah, this is probably the film where that would be.
Yeah.
It didn't. It
Right.
really didn't. Like, and so, like,
But
for instance,
do you think that's a rejection of 3D as a technological?
I think it's a rejection of 3D in not only as the technology of like seeing 3D things and having that sort of different feeling of visual fidelity, but also as a narrative device. Like, for instance, I have said in the past, like Tron Legacy, like I really liked the fact that in the real world it's flat and in the Tron world it's 3D, and they cut back and forth a couple times. You never have to take off the glasses or whatever, so maybe the actual action of it was a thing for me. But even then, like, I would say that is a gimmick in Tron Legacy. It's a gimmick that worked well, but it's still a gimmick. It's doing the narrative lifting of like, oh, you're feeling like you're in this different universe. Great. Even with the 3D here, and I want to make this very clear. Maybe it wasn't calibrated right. Maybe I'm something or other. But like I've experienced like deep 3D before.
Yeah,
and it's not an experience that has ever captivated me.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of 3D.
Like it doesn't. And here, there's enough going on where I like that it literally added nothing. I put on the glass because like what happens is he puts on the glasses and it fades out, and then you see the title of what you assume the film or the dream or whatever, which is also the movie, The Long Day's Journey into Night, comes up, and it's what's the word again? Sorry, the three
interocular. Interocular split is when they don't line up.
Yeah.
So basically, you get an interocular distance created where the left and the right eye are split.
So what that comes up, it's blurry as heck because you don't have your glasses on. You're like, oh, it's time to put the glasses on, and then you see the floating text in the thing, and then it goes in and it opens up with him pushing or on a little push cart thing in a mine shaft going down a tunnel. And even then, I was like, oh, is this supposed to feel immersive? Because he's in a tunnel and there's low light, but there's enough light. And like nothing felt, I literally, this entire sequence never got a feeling of extra depth. And it was 3D. Like I could tell you I was watching a 3D film. It did not affect me at all. I forgot about it in a minute.
Right. So this is the interesting thing with 3D, which is that I've always had sort of a problem with it. And it came from the film Up, the Disney Pixar film, which was sold as a 3D movie. And I was like, so there's this contradiction in 3D, which is that I want it to feel immersive, so I'm not noticing it. But if I'm paying extra for 3D, I want to be poked in the eye.
Yeah.
You know, like I want those moments where like they're explicitly saying to me, "Hey, check out this 3D thing," because there is this novelty factor of putting on these glasses. There's this sort of extra. I guess this is probably the wrong use, but there's this extra diegetic quality to like having to put on a pair of glasses, and so you're sort of separated, and you want someone to like point that out to you as opposed to feeling like. But the reality is, fundamentally, in order for 3D to really work, you want to not know that you're watching a 3D film. You just want to feel like this extra dimension.
You know what? The only time that 3D has actually worked for me, and I hate to go back to these points, is using the 3DS, the Nintendo handheld system.
Right.
It's because A, it's glassesless 3D.
Yeah.
And B, 3D films often, the way it's built out is like things sort of feel like the 3D elements feel closer to you. It's not normally like inward 3D, and I've noticed that. I don't know if that's controllable or not. At least I didn't until I was using the 3DS. The thing I love about the 3DS is when you're looking at it, it feels like you are looking into a box, and that's where the 3D is happening. Where films tend to project it out, and especially when done poorly. And not to say that this film did it poorly, it just wasn't effective because 3D, in my opinion, isn't effective. When something moves forward in a 3D film and goes off the edge, it's already ahead of the screen, air quotes, and it feels like that breaks your immersion more. Where if you have interior 3D and something does that, it goes off, you're just like, oh, it's just behind the edge of the box I'm looking at.
You know what I'd be really curious about is the company Red, no reference to Red Charizard as well, but they make the Red cameras that this film may have been shot on, is releasing a cell phone called the Red Hydrogen, which is supposed to have this sort of glassesless 3D. I've actually seen it, and I'm as much as I use and endorse the Red product, I'm not a fan of these glasses. But and like one of the things they've been trying to do is get content for this new glassesless 3D thing that they're kind of promoting. And this, I would love if Red basically launched the hydrogen phone with a copy of Long Day's Journey into Night built into it as like their example of it, because you could not get a bigger divide, and I think this is an important divide between art house and technology people to try and explain a technology. Like when you're sort of trying to promote a technology, you sort of go towards the most you gravitate towards spectacle. You don't gravitate towards introspection.
You'd have to go through like an hour and a half of what I considered not a great time to get to the 3D part of your phone.
So, and in terms of interpretations, like impressions of the film, I think I actually fundamentally agree with you, which is that the sort of noirish man trying to find women in this film and the sort of mystery of woman thing in this movie, I actually did find, like a little tiresome.
It's played out.
And, well, unlike Burning, I think the sort of, and I'm referring to Burning because this was our criticism and discussion that we just had about Burning, is that this, we really don't get a sense of the dynamic between the two characters. But that's fundamentally what the film is about. It is about one person's memory of this person.
And that's a very noir-esque thing. Burning is a character piece of sort of like what's going on with a couple different folks, if you really want to look at it.
There's a lot more narrative nuance.
The second I knew this, I figured out this was a noir thing like 10 minutes in, because I went into this blind. I was like, oh, like I already understand this boring character. Like I don't care. Like I don't.
Lau or
Lau.
He's a fairly...
Oh, girl got away and the crime boss fucked you up. Like I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
But the other thing is, I think this will lead into a broader point about slow cinema, which we're sort of talking about as well. Is that I think the narrative sparseness of it kind of plays in its favor somewhat, because it is about, like by the time you get to the end where it's sort of about immersing yourself in symbols and trying to find those symbols within your interpretation, or trying to find what those symbols mean in your interpretation, I think kind of lends itself. I wouldn't say that that is like particularly a narrative design choice, but it is sort of something that's sort of interesting and unique to this. And I think the other thing is that there are completely transcendent moments within both the beginning and the end. Like for me, the most transcendent and beautiful thing was this idea that, you know, Lau had been given this book, which at the beginning of the book, if you read this spell, will allow the room to spin. And when he's talking to, he finds a woman who's in prison who might have known the woman that he's trying to find. And as they're talking about how she met Wei Tang's character, you know, the room behind them starts to slowly spin and water cascades off the ground as they're sort of off the walls as they're talking. Did you know? You're just sort of looking at me blankly. Did you
during the prison thing?
Yeah. Did you notice that?
No.
It's really subtle, but it's beautiful. It basically, the walls behind them spin. You didn't notice the water dripping, like starting to pour off the walls like a waterfall?
No.
Oh.
And like I noticed that the camera was doing a slow sort of like move. I didn't see it as spinning. I'm trying to.
Okay.
Or maybe it did. I was so. I'm sorry. I was so bored.
Okay,
I was so bored.
Okay, well, let's talk. Well, let's come back to boredom
Sure.
in a second. Let's come back to boredom because I think that's a really important topic in regards to slow cinema. But in terms of like transcendent, I thought that was just beautiful, and I was watching that going, oh, I'm very interested in this filmmaker in terms of like what their ability to conjure images that sort of detach themselves from reality in the middle of sort of a fairly narrative sequence. The scene when, you know, like in terms of like the spinning of the world when he actually does shoot the gangster and like it's this overhead shot that spins upside down, and it's sort of like I understood what the shot was doing as soon as it was doing, but like the effect of like having that shot linger for so long upside down just kind of made me feel disorientated.
Sure, yeah.
And I thought it was really beautiful. And then the final shot when, you know, like Lau and Wei Tang's character, I'm saying that because I don't want to butcher pronunciations even though I have, and they sit on this bed, you know, that may have been their old room. You know, they sort of describe, I couldn't get clothes out of the closet or anything like that. And then they sit down and the room spins as they kiss, which is that reflection of the spell that they've been talking about. And I love that moment. And I think this kind of comes back to Red Sharazan's email because it, like, to me, it was like, oh, this is Vertigo. We're doing Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo now. And this sort of like interpretation of dreams and you know, like, they're even wearing red and green, which is like this color dynamic from Vertigo, and the room is spinning like when Jimmy Stewart's character makes out with, you know, finally kisses the woman he's been searching for the whole time. And I was like, oh, I love that for me, there's this sort of melding of cinema and dreams and interpretation happening all in this one thing. So I thought that was very beautiful and transcendent and delightful to watch. I agree with you that for me, the catharsis of these two people finally coming together has little narrative impact for me. But I think, you know, the other side of this is that it's if the feeling does capture you, if the sort of the synthesis of symbols kind of captures you in that moment, what a beautiful moment that would be for you, because you have to do all the work to get there. And that's quite a beautiful thing. And its simplicity and elegance is kind of works in its favor there.
Yeah, I will say though, and I've always been a champion of this not being a problem, but I think the reason why it works a lot of ways and why it is a moment of sort of catharsis for the audience member watching it is the entirety of that dream sequence. If you strip away, I don't even want to strip away. It's almost like, obviously, we've talked about the technical aspect of it and how amazing it is and how it does an amazing job immersing you in that moment or that 59-minute moment. But the catharsis you feel and the joy or the whatever, the good emotions that you experience during that thing, it can be boiled down to, quote, I understood that reference. Like you're putting all of these pieces that were, and on two levels, all the pieces that the first 2/3 of the film has brought together, anything you've picked up or gleaned, you're feeling like it's a bit more closer to what your dream might be because you understand the references of the dream and it draws you into a very thing. The other thing, I mean, the thing you just said, which I didn't pick up on about the Vertigo stuff, if that is an homage to Vertigo, That's again another dopamine shot in your brain for you understanding that reference. Yeah. So like, I don't want that to come off as me naysaying the experience of it. I'm huge in that's one of my favorite things, and the thing I enjoy very much throughout cinema and everything is when you understand a reference, when you know what's going on and you've figured it out, and you've done, in this case, I feel like done a lot of the legwork in order to be able to do that. It's an amazing feeling. It's one of the tools in the filmmaker's toolbox that for me is one of the most effective things. Just again, where I falter is, and I don't think the point of this film is, especially how it ends, I don't think the point of this thing is like, oh, will they ever find each other or get back together? The movie itself lets you know very clearly that that's not the point.
Yeah.
But it is very hard for me to get on board with what I feel like are the side of one-dimensional characters that we don't talk about often. Normally, one-dimensional character just means like a stock like thing, like, or not something that's not deep.
Yeah.
And this is so like maybe like a shallow pool is a character, like any blatant dumb action movie, the villain in John Wick 1, just because that's on my brain, the guy played by Greyjoy there. It's a stock character, you don't give a shit, but you understand it's a shallow thing.
Yeah.
Here the one-dimensionalness goes a different direction, where they're not shallow characters by any means of the imagination, but the pool is not wide. The pool is sort of like a very like sort of contained 1 foot by 1 foot thing that is very deep. It's a beaker or a cylinder, if you will.
Okay.
And that is something that in this movie is the right way to go, in my bullshit humble opinion. But the fact of the matter is, and we should get into the slow cinema stuff, I think, because even though I could see I was supposed to be picking up clues, I was picking up some of the clues, even though I could see that these characters, while one-dimensional, still had intrigue in them. I didn't care, and I was bored. And it got harder and harder for me to care about picking up the pieces to the puzzle until I feel like in the dream, I noticed a lot more stuff from the first half of the stuff before the dream than the second half. And when I did catch it, I was like, oh yeah, there was a clock, like that sort of shit.
Right.
So, and I don't know, maybe it is the slow cinema's issue. So what you sent me, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to watch that doc, but I've read things on slow cinema before.
Right. So slow cinema is kind of sort of aligned with the movement of slowing down the world. There's slow food, there's slow fashion, and the idea there is that we are not embracing the sort of way in which the world can be enjoyed, and I think the slow, for example, the slow food movement is the sort of step back towards growing your own grains, taking time to cook food, enjoying the pleasure of the minutia of moments. And slow cinema, in many respects, and I think this is sort of came out of a Sight and Sound article, but there's been a few essays about it as well, also bears that out. And I think there are many filmmakers that kind of embody the slow cinema kind of aesthetic. It's weird because this is, I feel like unlike, say, for example, the Dogma 95 movement, where filmmakers came together to create a social construct around their films, this is a set of critics who are kind of connecting the dots between a very disparate group of filmmakers. So my one criticism of like slow cinema as a movement is that there is no... I don't think there's any filmmakers who are going out and saying, I'm a slow filmmaker. It's more that critics are kind of interpreting a different way to view films. And I think I think it's equally interesting, but just a very different sort of perspective. And the thing that I think was interesting in the article, in the video that I'll post on Twitter, is this idea that slow cinema is also a reflection of a somewhat anti-capitalist approach to cinema, which is that capitalism is entirely about productivity and about using each moment to its fullest extent to create products, to create commerce, to create sort of a sort of exchange of ideas and goods in a sort of way that is understandable and consumable. And what slow cinema is, and I love that in every slow cinema essay, by the way, they always use Michael Bay as the antithesis of slow cinema. But I love the idea that in slow cinema, the idea is that we are absorbing and sitting in moments to basically enjoy boredom, and to have boredom be the functionality of what we're doing. Now, I don't. This film, Long Day's Journey into Night, which, by the way, isn't the exact title translation in Chinese.
Good, because there's a play.
We'll talk about Eugene O'Neill in a second. But I don't think this film actually fits into that category of slow cinema exactly as it's talking about, because there are, I've been to the theater and seen Theo Angelopoulos' film Ulysses Gaze, which is very much what I think slow cinema is talking about. And this film actually references Tarkovsky's Stalker, which, that shot that you mentioned where the glass is kind of like rattling because of a train. That's kind of a direct riff from Stalker. And the thing that it got me thinking about in terms of slow cinema was this idea that I have a copy of Stalker sitting on my shelf, and I've kind of always put off watching it. I've seen Stalker a couple of times, and then whenever I sit down to watch it now, or where I think I might be in the mood, I'm like, is this, because it's a 3-hour movie, and it's a 3-hour very long movie that just requires me to kind of sit in it for a long time. Is this the most productive use of my time? I've got so many things I need to be doing. I need to be making money.
Sure.
I need to be productive. I need to create things. I need to organize for this and this and this. But that's what slow cinema is about, is that, as far as an interpretive sort of interpretation of slow cinema is to sit in those moments and allow long periods of nothingness wash over us, and not to feel like that is a waste of time, but in fact that is what time is. And slow cinema often references time. This film references time quite a bit. We have a broken clock, and his entire photo is hidden inside a clock. Is that time? We sort of place upon ourselves this idea that time has to be used, but couldn't time just be lived? And I think that, to me, is a beautiful idea. Now, I don't, we live in a Western culture where we live in New York City.
York City?
Yeah, we're watching this in New York City. We live by, subway timetables. We live by our iPhones. We walk and talk by we talk about cinema in sort of metrics that are is this a value usage of your time? And but I think the sort of the promise of slow cinema, or the sort of potential of slow cinema, is to force yourself to strip all of that away and just be. And I think that is a beautiful idea. Now, whether you're willing, the kind of person that's willing to do that is entirely over to you. I'm certainly not. Tarkovsky's Stalker is sitting on my shelf unopened.
Right.
But I like the idea, and thinking about slow cinema, and this idea is making me go, I should just let myself go and watch that movie and not think of it as a waste of time, and not even consider what time and value means in the situation. Just be.
But here's the rub. Weirdly, it's not up to you whether or not you experience that in that way. And what I mean by that is, if something is effective, slow, fast, medium, what doesn't really matter, you're engrossed in it. I think, again, I know it gets bombastic eventually, but this will get sort of to my final point about slow cinema versus fast cinema, whatever. Mother, for me personally, it's a slow burn in the beginning, and then it ramps up, right?
Right.
Even during the slow parts, I am there. I am taken out. I never see the slow time as a waste of time. I am just in it to experience it, and I'm lost in it. And that, I'm not saying that's for everybody. Of course it's not. But that's just the example that comes to mind. Mm-hmm. Something like Stalker, which I have not seen, but I'm wondering, if you, and it could be two different mindsets. It could be 2 different days for you. If it was a Saturday afternoon and for some reason you had nothing to do, and your family was off visiting some folks or whatever, and you were just sitting around and you popped in Stalker, I could 100% see you just being yeah, and getting into that flow state that you've just described. if it was a Tuesday, if it was a Tuesday and you just finished dinner and like you wanted to hang out with your wife or your kid had to be put to sleep or something like that, and you were going to watch Stalker, you might experience that. You would experience that differently, and it's not. So there's when and how you experience it, but then also and that's sort of my example of your mindset for it. I mean, it could those entire opposite times could be exchanged, but your brain could be still working in that way.
Right.
So I don't think it's up to weirdly, I don't think it's up to the viewer's conscious self to determine whether or not they're going to enjoy something like that. I think it is very subjective to time, place, and mood.
Isn't that the viewer's conscious self?
No, that's a subconscious thing. I really think. I can't consciously sit down and be like, I want to watch Stalker right now and make sure I have a good experience with it. I can't do that with any film.
Well, okay, but here's where I'm sort of where I thought your argument was going.
Well, I wasn't done with it, so maybe I tangented too hard.
Okay, all right, we'll continue then.
I was just gonna say so back to sort of slow versus fast.
Yeah.
For me, and it's how I experience things. I don't want a full portion of either. I want a film. I find the films that engage with me the most are films that undulate either back and forth or ramp up or even sometimes ramp down depending on how you're dealing with it. I don't want to watch something where the pace is the same the entire way through, be that Drive or a Michael Bay Transformers bullshit movie, because it just washes over me in the most ineffective way possible. It's the way my brain works with sort of narrative interaction is, of course, there's what's actually happening in the story, but to help me connect to that, I kind of need to be kept a little bit, and this sounds more like I'm leaning towards fast, but I don't think it does, on my toes. I need there to be a wave of the speed at which I am experiencing a thing.
So I think the thing where I thought your argument was going to go was that when you said, I don't think it's up to you to how you interpret slow cinema. That's kind of what you said, right?
I meant like emotionally connect with or feel like it's okay, feel like it's an okay use of your time.
And I thought what you were going to say there was that it's over to the filmmaker to how they use your time. Is that? That's not quite what you said.
It's a balance. How do I put it? The movie is the movie. Therefore, the filmmaker has created what the filmmaker has created.
Right.
Right. So it's a let's call that a fixed point. The movie's not going to change based on your mood, but your interpretation of the movie will change on your mood, your place, your timing.
Yeah, and that is how you choose to interpret a movie, and that's
no.
What
so you can choose. Sorry, but I just want to make sure because I don't think I've been entirely clear.
Right.
You can obviously choose at what time you watch a movie.
Right.
But you often can't, depending on what your responsibilities are. Maybe you have to do it for a review. Maybe you're doing it for leisure. Your mindset, oftentimes, you don't get to choose the mood you're in.
Why not?
You're telling me that you've never been upset or happy or sad without yourself telling yourself, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be upset. Things happen with our brains. Let's get into this. Our brains are chemical reactions of things that create emotions that we feel.
Right.
Oftentimes we can put ourselves in positions where we know we will enjoy something. Oftentimes we go to things where we know we will be sad. But many times, and maybe I'm more manic than others, I don't know, but I don't have full control of my emotions at all times.
Right, but and that's fine. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying it's just the two things that I don't quite connect here, which is that this thing that you said where you don't get to choose, but we do get to, like if you're in the right mood for it, you can enjoy it, and if you're in the wrong mood for it, you won't enjoy it. Is that what you're saying? I'm unclear about what you're saying.
Let's even go beyond enjoyment. You can engage with it, right? Slow cinema, I feel like, for me, I can only speak for me.
Yeah.
I've very rarely been in the point in my life where I could sit down and watch a piece of slow cinema and be like, have that sort of flow state or zen state that you've sort of described, of being like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just take the time and sit and relish in the idea of going back to the food, like growing your own grain and doing this stuff and not live in our New Yorkish sort of thing. I feel like for me personally, films have never been able to do that for me.
Right.
I think things like meditation, other things outside of looking at a screen do that for me.
Sure.
And I can't really speak, but I'm saying overall, the film, it's weird because it's not like it's up to you on when you decide to watch the film,
Right.
but you don't always have the emotional agency to experience this flow state that you've desired.
I think what the point that I'm unclear about in terms of your interpretation is I feel like you're rejecting the hypothesis of what slow cinema's potential could be, which is this idea that we don't have to interpret films as a value per moment kind of equation. We could just be in moments, and I'm saying that's the potential of how you could interpret what slow cinema might mean. It's the same in the same way, like you might go, instead of fast food, I'm going to enjoy food, and you can make a choice about that, right? Like it's the thing where you said you've got no choice in it that confuses me.
I mean, I was just talking about your emotional state and being able to get into the state at which you talked about enjoying. That sort of, again, that might be a side thing. Let's even, because that might not be important.
Just the hypothesizing for a second. If you choose to engage in that state and be in that thing, that's your choice, right?
You can't choose to be in that state.
Why can't you choose?
You can choose to try to be in that state, and maybe you'll get there.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I think I might have misspoken or got off the point too much.
Okay.
Let's back up.
Let's back up just to cinema here.
Yeah.
The hypothesis here is that could you just see a moment like, the reason I bring this up is that, for example, I've only seen one of the classic, the film that's referenced in slow cinema sort of theory, it's a very new theory, is Antonioni's film La Ventura, which came out at the Cannes Film Festival in 1966.
Okay.
I want to say. I've seen that movie. That movie was booed out of Cannes for being too slow, too boring, too difficult to engage with. The movie has since then become like this heralded moment in Italian neorealism cinema, and it is talked about and is often thought. And I've only seen it once.
The backlash to the backlash.
And the first time I saw it, I admit I was bored. It's now been over 20 years since I've seen that film, and I vividly remember it. There's a film called Le Quattro Volto, which I watched on Netflix when I moved to America. I was very excited to see this film, and it's basically a film about death, and it's about like this there's that old idea, Archimedes idea, human beings are animal, mineral, spiritual, yeah. And this film is basically you just see a person die and then they reincarnate into an animal, and we're there with them in an animal, then they reincarnate into mineral, and there's this amazing sequence in it where the creature, the spirit reincarnates into this goat, and there's a sequence where we're just watching this goat go back and up and down a street. I think it's like for 12, 15, maybe more. Thing is, I vividly remember it, and I what I'm talking about, I guess, is I want to the promise of the idea of slow cinema theory for me is getting back to that moment, to those moments where I am just in those moments, and they're so vivid in my brain. And I think the thing, it sort of comes back to why we do this film in amongst a Detective Pikachu and a John Wick and all that sort of stuff, is the idea that cinema holds such a breadth of promise. And this is why I love the medium. Yeah, so you sort of talked about meditation and being other spaces where you can kind of get that. For me, this is always, cinema is my medium. This is what I live and breathe. And for me, the possibilities of endless spectrums of what cinema can be is exciting, and is what is fulfilling about it. And I think the only thing I sort of butt up against in terms of what you're saying, and I don't quite understand what you're saying.
I don't even go back to it because it's not important, to be honest. I want to get back to
the
what
idea
you've
of
said.
Choice.
Well, we can get to that after if we want to. I just want to say I 100% agree with what you just said about sort of the ability of cinema to have this sort of breadth of being able to do all of those things.
Yeah.
Sometimes in cinema, like Mother, let's say, I get into a flow state with it because it is so slow. Sometimes I get into a flow state with something that I'm really enjoying, like Avengers, because I am emotionally tied to literally something that is incredibly bombastic. The speed at which I am presented a thing doesn't matter as long as, weirdly enough, it's part of the balanced breakfast. Like, as long as I am getting enough of everything I desire in my cinematic storytelling, if we're just talking about pacing. I get bored when something is consistently all one thing all the time. And that's why movies are great, because you can go and find things that are different when, like, we've undulated from Burning to Detective Pikachu to A Long Day's Journey into Night, and next week we're doing John Wick. This is my John Wick 3. This is what I live for when it comes to movies, because if you watch just all one thing, that sucks. And I think that you can look at that from a large scale perspective of a bunch of different cinema, sort of what you've mentioned. But also, I think for me personally, I tend to enjoy films that, from a pacing perspective, move between different paces in the films. I haven't connected with John. I haven't connected with Michael Bay's Transformers past the first one, because I think they're just a shit show of flashy lights and bullshit. Like, I can't even get remotely into them. And in this particular film, for the first 2/3, I was just like, okay. Like, nothing grabbed me enough narratively, and despite it being beautiful, and I do think the actors doing a good job in the style in which they were directed, it didn't catch me. So that's sort of where I stay. I like it when there is a varying thing, both either we can talk about in a specific film or in the breadth of films that I watch. Just to sort of clarify, and I think I overstepped when we were talking about this. I tangented too hard to the right about your choice in enjoying a thing. I merely meant that, for me, the mood I am in will affect whether or not I will thoroughly enjoy a film that I will be watching. Mm-hmm. And personally, again, I don't get to choose my mood all the time. That's really all I was saying, and I don't even remember how I got there based on the speed conversation. I think it was because we were talking about sort of like being lulled into a state of like just letting time go and like kind of have that nice sort of meditative moment with a film. I think I kind of got latched onto a thing where I'd be like, I've literally been like, I'd like that right now, and I know my brain won't let me do it.
Right.
So, and what I'm saying personally, and this will sort of be the end of that thought for me, I've never found a film that can take me from being like, I want to be relaxed, right? But my brain's going crazy. I've never experienced the film that's like, here, calm down, and like get me to it without me feeling like the pace of my thought process and the film were not meshing. And so that's just a me thing. Maybe films can't do that for me, and maybe they can do it for you or other people. I think that's where I was going, and I'm sorry that I took us on such a long way around to a point that didn't really need to be made.
It's just, I guess we have different ways of processing our emotions. Maybe I want to, but to the broader point, I think I'm interested in the prospect of slow cinema, and it makes, and sort of diving into it has made me rethink things. For example, I saw another film, Zama, directed by Lucretia Martel, who was almost tapped to direct a Marvel film this year, and she made what is the prototypical slow cinema movie with like very long takes, and I didn't enjoy it as I was watching it, but then like framing it in this idea of slow cinema kind of allowed me to rethink that movie and go, oh, maybe I should go back and revisit that. And I'm kind of curious about this idea. I particularly, the thing that struck me is this sort of anti-capitalist nature of like allowing time not to be a value production mode of experience. And I think I really like that idea. Whether I'm always in the zone for it or not is not quite right. But I'm interested in, like, now that I have this sort of framing device for how to think about time because of this sort of movement in cinema, then I think I have a different way I can interpret it. And I think I would interpret Long Day's Journey into Night in a different way. I agree with you. I actually, I found the film to be somewhat thin. Like the comparison is often made to Wong Kar-wai's movies, where it's a film about a man trying to find a woman, or a woman trying to find a man, In the Mood for Love, Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, all those kinds of films. And I think those films have kind of a dynamism to them, where there is an undulation of back and forth between what is at stake and what isn't at stake. That's not quite what this movie is doing. Yeah. But that's, certainly I react more to that, and I find myself more engaged in that. But I'm excited by the idea of watching this in a sort of a different, maybe poetic state of mind, where I'm kind of like absorbing the moments for what they are. And that's not to say the way I'm interpreting it is true to life. Like my life is probably closer to Long Day's Journey into Night, where you're just kind of thinking about things and you're not sure what's real and what's not, and you're just kind of sitting around imagining the world. That's probably actually closer to what my actual life is like. So I'm sort of excited about that. I wanted to just to bounce off another response to the movie. I was trying to bring on this guest, Mike Fu, great name, who's the assistant dean at Parsons College, to talk about Burning, but he couldn't make it. But he mentioned in his email to me that, if you want to talk about Long Day's Journey into Night, I've got some thoughts about it.
He's got some thoughts.
And he didn't like it. While I appreciated Bygone's directorial debut, Kylie Blues, I have to say this follow-up feature felt gimmicky and absolutely lacking in substance. I've told many of my friends this. The trailer is the movie, is the trailer. You don't get much more plot. It's moody AF, that's for sure. But the style is not enough to keep a movie of this length afloat. What poor use of Tang Wei. I would be curious to hear what your takeaways for this movie was. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah,
I think we've kind of given our takeaways. If you want to email us in with your thoughts, if you've seen Long Day's Journey into Night, please email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. I will say one final thing to do with Eugene O'Neill. This movie if we've said Long Day's Journey into Night many, many times on this episode, you might be thinking of the Eugene O'Neill play, for which the translation of this title only shares the name with Long Day's Journey into Night. The original Chinese translation is Last Wandering on Earth, I believe it's called. Last Evenings on Earth, which is the title of a short story by Roberto Bolano about people wandering around Chile and Latin America with unusual quests, which I think is actually a closer...
Yeah, why not just call it that?
I think it's just the translation from one to the other.
But you just did a better... You just did like, if what you just read is the accurate translation of, like, the words as they are written, like, as
far as I know, I don't speak Mandarin.
And I'm not saying... But let's assume, for this argument, that title is way better and more pertinent than ripping off a Eugene O'Neill play.
But if you're a marketer in China who wants, or if you're
looking for those
sweet
food, Eugene O'Neill dollars,
yeah, you're looking at those sweet Eugene O'Neill dollars, you might be going, you know what? I could tap into that money. Well, they just did Long Day's Journey into Night at BAM with Jeremy Irons. So maybe there's a wave of Eugene O'Neill that this film is riding on.
Jamie thought it was going to be because she was going to go with me, and then when she was like, "How was it?" and I described it, she's like, "That's not how I remember it."
Yeah, that's not that play. This film shares a title in translation only, but yeah, the closer Chinese translation, again, I'm getting this from Justin Chang's article, is Last Evenings on Earth. Which is, but it's not an adaptation of Roberto Bolano's stories.
Titles all over the place.
Yeah. It's kind of sorcering our kind of our way through that.
Oh, God. Go check out that podcast.
Yeah, Test of Time podcast. We were on there, I think, a couple of weeks ago talking about the movie Sorcerer. And next week, we will be talking about a man and his dog.
And a woman and her two dogs.
Oh, is that what's happening? I've only seen the first one, and I saw it while
I
was...
You need to see the second one. What I love about these films, I'll talk about it next week, is each one takes place like 5 minutes after the last one, and it's so fun.
I think I'll set this up as a preamble. This is not a point to discuss yet. We'll discuss it next week, but I tweeted you, or I texted you when I watched John Wick 1 on vacation, and I said, John Wick feels like 50 Shades of Grey made for 14-year-old boys. Let's talk about that next week.
I have a very interesting... Yeah.
Let's talk about that next week.
Well, before that, Shahir, when you are not just surfing the dreamscape of Eugene O'Neill to its maximum potential, where can folks find you?
You can find me misinterpreting Eugene O'Neill at my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are choosing whether to be engaged or unengaged in a film, where can people find you?
You can find me never having that choice at MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works. Also, Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram and PSN, and Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, you can find my good works over at Extra Credits on YouTube. Shahir, we're doing a bit of a film thing.
Oh.
Next week, Extra Credits.
And you didn't call me.
Sorry, buddy. Well, because I didn't write it. It was on the Cool Shove effect.
Oh, yep, the Cool Shove effect.
And we are basically, we bring it up and we bring up how it came about, and then the Hitchcock tie-ins, of course. And there's also a shameless plug for us, don't worry. But then how games can do it, and can games do it? And if they could, how could they do it?
Now, this came up in our Bandersnatch episode when I think it was James Portnow, your boss, asked me about how cinema can create interpretive events. And I think I went on to talk about the Kuleshov effect in that episode. So it's all full
ties
circle.
in.
Yeah.
So we got that going up and a couple other wonderful things over there. This has been the only podcast about the film Long Day's Journey into Night.
Or Last Evening on Earth.
This has been the last podcast of Long Evening on Earth.org.
By the only podcast on movies, about movies, on Earth, on the planet Mars. Good night.
And good luck.